My memory of things then is that just everything felt really uncertain, and yeah, just everything was unsure, and things seemed kind of a bit neglected. You know, the land was hadn't been looked after that well, so the forestry and woodlands were all a bit delicate. The hydro was delicate, housing was delicate, and you just didn't know how it was going to go.
It was a very relaxed, always laughing. That's why, you know, laughing at each other and at yourself as well, you know.
It was okay, but we came up very, very green, you know, to run a restaurant and guest house that was just a ruin, and we built that up. So it was all owned by the estate, Knoydart Peninsula Limited, and everybody was answerable more or less to them. We were private, but we depended on them for everything, for the electricity, for the everything like that. It wasn't run, it was run more or less for the rich folk up at Inverie House. But unfortunately, it had gone down a lot since Major MacDonald had sold.
And it was faded elegance already. The place was on its beam ends. We had to eat in black tie in the big house. So it had sort of illusions of, not grandeur was the wrong word, grandeur was past.
Philip Rhodes owned the estate, and then it was Brearley, Reg Brearley, it was sold on to him, as you probably know all this now. And then that's when things went belly up. So it kind of went downhill all the way for there. And then he then sold it, I think, to, I can't remember, Avery or something like that, and then Hinchcliffe, and then that was it. And then the foundation. But up until then, it was only when Philip Rhodes had the estate, it was fine. It was good. I liked working for Philip Rhodes. But after that, it was a horrendous time. It was horrible. And I think because the worst bit for me was I came up here in 1988, and the girls, Isla was 9 and Rona was 7. So they were at primary school, and then they had just started secondary. And our jobs were tied, the house was tied to the job. And I thought, if I can get them through schooling and I have to leave, you know, that was my kind of worry, that I didn't want their education to be disrupted.
You know, when Philip Rhodes had it and he was kind of running it, there was some kind of structure to it. But then when he sold it, it all kind of went to rat shit, really. He did. He sold it to Brearley. But he was just a rogue. You know. And he came and, I mean, the place was getting very run down anyway, because, you know, they were struggling to find money to pay wages, and I mean, I was just a neighbour, you know, over the hill, really just part of the community. I wasn't. But all the folk within the community were friends of mine that I'd been working with, and I had been working for the estate when I first came. I came as a stalker to the estate in '85. And then things sort of started to deteriorate, I suppose, over the years. And then when Brearley took over, it became a little bit of a conflict between, you know, what they wanted to do and what the community really wanted. And they tried to sell us this idea that they were going to run an outward bound, you know, thing for these poor underprivileged children. But the more we found out about it, the more it became obvious that it was a bit of a scam. You know, change of plan to change the hostel into, you know, accommodation for kids and all the rest of it. And we had a big public meeting in the hall here, and with the planning authorities. And basically they were refused planning to change, and it kind of knocked they were told to go away and rethink their plans and come back with a better structured thing.
Some of them I could get on with, but not very many. So I was a bit of a rebel. Nothing's been filmed yet.
They did try to split the community, and I resented that very much. And he tried to do a sort of English versus Scots, and grated with me rather than because, well, my wife's English for a start.
Well, we had a residents' association or community association at that time, and that's where it developed from the opposition. And we had annual general meetings, special meetings, and it was all unanimously agreed. We opposed the proposition, and that's where it all started.
Well, it created a big split in the community because at the time the estate employed, I can't remember, about half a dozen folk maybe, or maybe 5, 6, 7 folk. And so the new owner was trying to convince the employees that this was what was going to save their jobs. And whereas the rest of the community that wasn't dependent on the estate for employment, but was dependent on the estate for electricity, and some other things, like the estate owned the pier at the time.
So there was all this going on, and then there was, I'm not sure who was the person that said, this isn't working, we need community ownership, there's better ways of managing Knoydart. Mm-hmm. And then there was meetings. So then you were going to that, and I don't know, do you want to be saying that? But you know that...
I didn't care at that point.
Yeah, because you realised that...
Because Ian had been
there
sacked
can be better ways.
And stuff, and I had worked with Ian for so long as well, So I remember we all got a letter. The one thing I do remember, we got a letter, because there had been all this publicity about Hinchcliffe, because he owned this, is it Fascia? He owned all these sock shop and Red or Dead, these companies. And so he had bought the estate, and then it was faxes then, it wasn't a computer sort of thing. So I was getting all these faxes coming in, don't trust this man, and getting letters saying this man is evil, he bought our company, he's trashed it and all this kind of thing. And so we were getting all these letters warning us about this terrible man. And I was passing them on to Ian and stuff, and he says, oh, what can we do about it? He's bought the estate and stuff.
At the same time, leading up to the buyout, there was a certain sense of anticipation and hope, but also still uncertain, because you didn't know what way it was going to go. And some days it would feel like the community buyout was going to happen, and other days it seemed really unlikely.
Yes, those were quite interesting times, very interesting times, but the fact that it happened, and it happened with willing community support, except for 1 or 2 people. And that's the difference. We'd seen enough of the old.
Most of the stuff any serious meetings would be in the village hall. There was lots of unofficial meetings in the old forge, of course, but most of the official things were done in here.
Some people saying, well, this is really generous offer, which clearly it was, but just that feeling of, well, it's not going to, 25 years, well, here we are, 25 years on, what would have happened? Would we have had to say, give up the lease?
Yeah, well, there was all this uncertainty attached with how, because the idea of the foundation was novel. It wasn't You know, there'd only been a very small number of people tried to do a similar thing before, so it was a novel idea, so lots of people were concerned about it because it was novel and unknown. But at the same time, the ownership was unknown as well. You know, it was obvious that the owner latterly, there was no communication with the owner at all. So the owner was just not there. So it was a choice between an unknown current owner, an unknown foundation type structure, or the hope that that somebody else unknown might come along on a white Charger and save the day. And there was definitely, and you know, there's always folk that hope that an individual with lots of money is going to come along and save the day.
Mum was a bit like a secret agent in my mind, that you were doing your job, that you were working for these people that just were untrustworthy, and they didn't even really know what the owner looked like. Hey, they would kind of like, you're like, oh, is that the new owner there? They never really came and sort of. And I remember when they came by helicopter, was that John Darville that they came and
Oh yes,
people were
it was
like,
when Hinchcliffe bought the estate. I never, this guy Hinchcliffe bought the estate, and I never met him. I worked for him, never met
But it
him.
appeared to me that the bank didn't want to sell, or didn't want to see the estate being sold to the community, because that would be an upset to the establishment and the status quo. That seemed to me the politics of the time.
That they were not doing the place any favours. And Grant's mother, Grant may have told you, his mother went and stood outside the Bank of Scotland at one of their annual meetings and complained about it. Did she tell you?
And a few of us went down. It was the day after there was a Ceilidh in the hall, so we left the Ceilidh at 2 a.m. or something like that, and then jumped on a boat, went to Mallig, got in the car, drove to Edinburgh to get there for, I don't know when, 8 o'clock in the morning or whenever they start preparing for this AGM, and then we stood outside whatever that big fancy hotel above the station is in Edinburgh, and we stood out there and sort of picketed that and handed out leaflets. There was only 4 or 5 of us or something, and a few of us went in and wandered through and follow, you know, with the other shareholders along lots of corridors, and eventually got to the meeting room, and we got through the first 2 levels of security, and when we got to the final door, they said, you know, where's your invitation? And we were like, well, you know, we haven't got one. So at which stage we got chucked out. But at the same time, the talks were ongoing between folk like John Hutchison and Nigel Hawkins with the bank. But basically, we were accusing the bank of allowing one of its creditors to trade insolvent.
Well, yeah, there was the surprise. You know, I had a great surprise when the backers, the people who backed us, and of course the Ascent Crofters had done their buyout a little bit before us, and that's where the inspiration came from. You know, that if they can do it, we can do it. I was secretary at the time of the Community Association, and I got busy writing to the then Scottish office, English government appointed, government of Scotland at that time. They weren't too helpful, but we got Highland Council on board, and you know, famous people like Cameron McIntosh, who has a place down there, Chris Fraser, the athlete, he joined in with us. And as I say, the press were wholeheartedly in support. Whatever we did, they were here, you know, supporting us.
But Chris Fraser, like I say, and Nigel Hawkins certainly helped a lot, you know. And folk within the community here were, you know, Bernie was a great advocate of it too, you know, and, you know, there was folk like Roger and Rona and, you know, quite a lot of the locals that supported the whole thing, you know, to get it up and running, you know.
I can remember meetings in the hall where, yeah, there despite people's differences of opinion on the minutiae of it, I think there was, well, my memory of it is that there was a kind of collective feeling of wanting to make it happen. Yeah, it did feel like people were pulling together, and I think the fact that we were getting support from such a wide range of people. I mean, I was helping with the public appeal, and like people were sending cheques in the post from all over the world and little notes of support to say, you know, we really hope this works out. So I think that really helped us feel like we weren't just like a little group of people that were trying to do something crazy. Well, maybe, well, we were.
There was one moment of absolute joy. When we actually got the estate, it was in March 1999, we, inspired by Bastille Day, which was coming, you know, we took over the big house at Addercayle. That was a moment of absolute joy. We'd done it. It was like the storming of the Bastille.
Yeah, just a kind of feeling of like disbelief almost, and yeah, elation. And then I would say at some point after that comes the kind of, wow, what are we going to do now? The Forest Trust was set up and already had a woodland management plan in place before the buyout, in case the buyout didn't work, and then in theory the community could still have managed the woodland irrespective of who the landowner was, if they were willing to sign an agreement. So there was a woodland management plan in place, ready to go, and timing-wise, it was the same month that the buyout and the trust was established as a charity. So, in terms of the forestry side of things, it was like, okay, now we can start doing the actual work. But yeah, with the wider kind of land, where do you start? Houses that need work doing, and you've got, you know, hydros that are falling apart, and people that, yeah, how do you start paying people? Where do you find the money to pay people?
Whereas if the control was based on a group of people, it's more stable. It's got a stronger, more diverse foundation structure that's going to mean that one particular numpty can't or shouldn't be able to derail the whole thing.
There's always been a lot of kind of cohesiveness and sense of working together, but within that there's lots of differences of opinion, and you know, as there are in all communities, but there is definitely a strong sense of community and looking out for each other.
I don't recall it being, I think most people generally supported it. I mean, there was an odd one that was, you know, that were a bit sceptical, and some that thought it was, you know, a communist uprising. But I think in general it was all fairly positive. You know.
It's actually getting over the challenges and achieving, I think, what we've achieved. And that is, you know, that's the big thing. And the fact that we've got a pretty stable community who are basically pulling in one direction.
And it does help to have a sense of shared opportunity and also responsibility, you know. And you know, it's evolved over the years. It's nice to see some of the youngsters coming into the committees, and you know, it's not the same old codgers that are kind of you know, they've kicked me into the long grass a while ago, and so they should have done, you know, I'm quite pleased to have. But, you know, the youngsters have picked up the kind of mantle, you know, and run with it. And I think the fact that a lot of the, you know, we still have quite a lot of our youngsters working living and staying in the community.
The sale of plots with rural housing burdens is, I think, really significant and important, and more important than it's not immediately obvious why it's important. But the rural housing burden scheme, whatever it is, allows residents to buy their own place and build their own house, and that is really, really important in terms of building a community and connection with the place, and the whole experience of being empowered to build your own house and just having that opportunity is really significant, and there's loads of potential to do more of that, but it's a fantastic scheme.
I think I probably only started getting that awareness from when I left, probably. So I left at 18 and moved to Glasgow and ended up there for like 9-10 years, and came home regularly. But yeah, some people, like I did that. My brother has always been here, but I always kind of knew that I would end up back here. I'm not sure why that was. Maybe, probably the way it is had a big part of that, and all my family's here as well, obviously. So yeah, but I do feel like I probably would not have been able to move back if it weren't for the way it is today. It took me, yeah, I was kind of ready to come home 2 or 3 years before I actually managed to get work and stuff, and mainly a place to live with the job. That was the only reason I could come back. But kind of deciding to like wanting to be here, that could only happen because of what this foundation's doing with like the housing plots. So as soon as I came back and was eligible, I started that process, and I would never ever be able to afford to buy a house here. So that definitely is really important.
But that Ian Robertson came to work on that, and he stayed because he bought the pub. Yeah. And a lot of the people who were there then, like Rona, who came to work for them in the office, they've stayed, they've had children, and their children have gone away to university and come back to work. So we've got quite a lot of youngsters here now who have grown up and work here, who were born here. As far as the locals go, and for what they've done, the locals have renovated this. This floor was an oak tree that was growing down the road that fell down. So rather than cut it up for firewood, look at it now. This is all local timber.
And all the local things on the wall, the names, and in the pub,
that's
were
all
from the old
yeah.
floorboards.
And that's all the people who have contributed. There's a wall there, a wall of fame, virtually. And it's like the pub.
Well, I guess one of the most significant things is making sure the fence around the village was secure, because it had, I think the term is porous, so the deer would come and go, and yeah, you would have them outside in the street, which obviously for tourists was quite nice. They liked that, but in terms of the habitat, it was just disastrous. You couldn't grow anything, but also round about the village and up about halfway up into the woods, things weren't growing because of the roadies. So yeah, watching that transform over time has been pretty amazing, just to see the land recovering, and watch that process has been great. And then the kind of patchwork of new woodlands that have been planted is just helping link it all up. There's some really rich, diverse old woodland at Scottis, which is part of the Atlantic rainforest. So that's being protected from the deer, but also with having these other new pockets of woodland, hopefully it'll expand and grow.
I think go and look at the school. That's the fact that it's full of young children. I think that is a bit of an indication of what's happened. But for a very small community, it's had a lot of big projects to deal with. Things like the hydro, the pier, the infrastructure, the electricity, the renewables.
There's a committee for just about everything, However, this has been a lot of hard work, but this has been quite successful. And we've sorted out deer management. It's sort of a misunderstanding that deer management is a profitable thing. It's not. It's a Victorian sport. And before you put somebody on the hill to shoot a deer, a stag, you need a ghillie, a stalker, a larder, in this case a boat, Land Rovers, trailers, radios, rifles. It's very expensive. So we've set up a butcher shop, and that's been very successful, and it is a mail order.
And it's going to get to a point where people my age are going to have to take over. So I just thought, right, well, I'll start now and then maybe be of some use when I actually need to be useful, because I'll kind of have learnt a little bit. But yeah, it definitely gave me any appreciation of what they do. And my mum was chair of the foundation for quite a few years. And I saw how difficult it could be for her as well. It's not an easy thing. They should definitely be getting paid for it, without a doubt. For many, it's like a second full-time job, which I think a lot of people don't realise. But it just shows you how much they want it to work, because a lot of people would just go, you know what, this isn't worth it. I'm not getting paid for it, or whatever. But they keep going. And yeah, I think that kind of speaks volumes as to how much folk care about it.
It's hard to imagine it happening if it was still privately owned. Because I think one thing that community ownership has done is enabled lots of different opportunities to arise, which means that there's a more diverse range of things happening, and it's not dependent on one person making a decision about what's going to happen. So yeah, it means that there's more opportunity.
I can't remember, it was at the 10 or the 15-year anniversary, we did a big timeline in the hall here, and we actually put all our achievements on a timeline, and it really hit you between the eyes because you forget a lot of what it was like and people coming into the community now don't know of the battles of the past and just take it for granted that this is the way it's always been. But actually, if you go back and look at what's, the timeline and how we got to where we are now, it really brings it home to you that, things have changed radically to what they were,
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't lived here for long before the buyout, so I don't have a lot of experience of what it was like, apart from maybe the 4 or 5 years before that. But it's just so apparent in like the kind of history of the place, because there's nobody over 40 that was born here.
But we've been through the hard side of it, very much so. And now I think anyone wanting to try and go down this road, the road's a lot easier now.
Everybody who goes through must realise you've got to balance the books.
It's easy to talk about this sort of whole land thing and community land thing as a bunch of revolutionaries, you know. But actually, by nature, it's quite a conservative thing. You can't do very much without a lot of people agreeing. You can't. It's very difficult to be radical in a community ownership thing. The whole thing in itself might be radical, but actually, for the community to do radical projects, because they've got to have the support of a range of people.
I think that it's really important to get young people involved from the start, and to keep young people involved throughout. And that's perhaps where we struggle a bit, although there are young people getting involved, which is great. So finding other ways apart from long, boring meetings to do the business, I think, would be good.
Well, first of all, you've got to get the community support, you know, the indigenous community. That's the first thing you've got to do. Then look around you to see if you can find any dignitaries, or the Highland Council, you know, people like that, to support you, because they've got the expertise. I mean, I didn't have any expertise, you know, about buying a big piece of land, you know. But it just happened by a degree, you know, everything just fitted into place as we went along. And the inspiration, of course, with us at Crofters.
Seek professional advice. There's plenty of professional advice out there.
That's the main thing. That's the hope, is to do up the houses that need doing up, build some new houses, allow people to come here, and allow people to come here, live and work, and have kids, and have a good life when they're here, you know, so have a social life. Don't be locked away, be able to come out and enjoy cultural events and be in an environment where they can kind of sort of live, work and breathe.
I mean, you'll only get out of it what you put in.
Yeah.
And if you're not prepared to do the work, then you don't really deserve the reward. So we've worked hard, all of, you know, the majority of the community have been here a long time. And now we're reaping the benefits. I mean, I don't want to go anywhere else. I mean, I'm in my 80s now, and I'm quite happy to spend the rest of my days here and enjoy it. And that's the main thing, we enjoy it. As I say, with the generosity of people in all sorts of ways, and the apart from the climate, we just love it.
I wish I had been a little bit older to have seen kind of, or have more of an understanding of what they did, because like I've been involved in the pub buyout since that started, but we were really lucky because it's like, right, well, we've done this, like the collective we have done this for the last 20 years, so we kind of knew where we were starting. But back then, it must have been such a huge thing with kind of and maybe the community ownership concept obviously wasn't kind of massive then, and they were basically, just starting from scratch, and it's quite amazing what they did, to be honest.
A Knoydartarian. So, both my son and my daughter were born here, and then my grandson was born here. And it's nice to be, you know, they're the new generation of locals.
You know, normally glibly I say don't do it, but in reality you do it, you know, and you have to do it, but you just don't think it's the solution. You just understand there's a commitment involved. Like I said, just like getting a puppy, there's a commitment and you have to see it through.
I think that the community and the is part of the ecosystem that involves the natural habitat. So I don't think you can separate the two. And to do the work in the habitat, you need the people. So the two need to grow together, I think, for it to be really work in harmony.
And if youngsters come out with new ideas, good. But that's me. I'm an optimist.